function, Brian, was initially going to be, try to encourage more angel investment, not less. But I think that the bigger message I'd like to get out there to this audience and to everybody who's involved in legislation and policy for the government would be to actively include and involve entrepreneurs and business owners who are very busy running their businesses, but if there's a way, and hopefully we'll become that way, reach out to them while this legislation is being thought about, while the recipe is being put together, before it's being baked or half-baked in some situations. And I think what will happen there is there'll be more support, but also you'll have a lot more solutions to include into that mix. And that's what Voice of Entrepreneurs is supposed to do. And one of our missions in support of that is to actually build call it a parallel Congress, so that every district, every representative, every senator can reach out a lot more quickly to the people who are there, working 70 hours a week, growing their businesses and creating the jobs. So.
Great, thanks. And finally, Jake.
Thank you. I guess I'm the entrepreneur in the room. I'm not a policymaker, and I'm the heads-down guy that's focusing on my business. What I can talk about is my experience starting up. I bootstrapped the company with very little money, then pitched hundreds of angels, finally got an angel investment in private equity, then got VC back, then launched products, very involved in innovation. And I think that there's a disconnect between legislation and what's going on in an entrepreneur's world and creating jobs. And the majority of money that I've taken in and the checks that have been written to me and faith that I'd be able to have a successful business, the majority of that's gone to create jobs and create jobs in Michigan, where I'm from. And there have been other jobs in California and New York. So being able to innovate and not having roadblocks in front of me is really important to the success of our country. And the way that I see things from the consumer electronic perspective is that the only way to be able to have a globally competitive business is to be able to innovate freely. So I guess my policy would be anything that allows new companies that are doing disruptive technologies to have a seed capital and to be able to follow that path from seed to Series A to VC backing, that's what we need, and it's just not there right now.
Jake, John and I might arm wrestle you for the title entrepreneur in the room.
Since you are, both of you, I guess, since you are the entrepreneurs in the room, as you started your businesses, can you talk a little bit about how some of the policy things that you took advantage of, the things that Washington did put in place, and the things that you worry that might prevent future entrepreneurship going forward? But either of you.
Well, when I first got started, it was really taking advantage of the Small Business Administration and getting score advising, and then having access to some capital that was available through some loans and getting things going. But the big thing for me was more about following that industry and driving it. But unfortunately, when I first got started, my biggest investment actually came from overseas, because there were factories willing to work with me, or that just wasn't available in the United States. So when I went over there, manufacturing was down, lines were open. I was able to launch products and then bring them to the Consumer Electronics Show. So I think that getting started, there's not a lot of programs at that first ground level right now. I've seen more of it coming out, but it's still not there.
I've actually got two thoughts on that, and the first one would be that I'm actually pretty involved with entrepreneur organization. There's a group called YPO that's pretty active as well. There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that really have no idea of the advantages if they're there, working with either SBA or other groups. And most of them just want the government to not be in their way. I actually had a problem the third year. I had an e-commerce company I started back in '96. It was the third year. We were growing really fast. We had about 30 employees. And I remember this distinctly. I had all my cash flow models, my Excel spreadsheet. This is before I brought on a better accountant than I am. And we basically were investing in a new auction product for the internet. And so I hired 3 incredible Java developers. We got going with this great product. And then, come around March, I realized, I've got to come up with cash to pay this tax bill that I didn't realize. So that was on me. But then it was a massive scramble. We actually had to raise some very onerous debt terms to pay that tax liability. So what I'd like to see in terms of being part of the solution, not being part of the screaming problem, would be when these companies are hitting a certain growth rate. I liked what you said a lot, Bob, but if a company, whether it's a natural-born citizen or not, is growing at a certain rate, say 10%, 20%, 30% a year, pick a number, that they can at least hold their income taxes and reinvest them back in the company. I think that would have a dramatic effect. It would have had a big impact on my first company and at least 2 other companies that I've invested in.
Sure, go ahead.
So let me follow on something I think, John, you said about capital gains. So as an outsider, but I used to live in Washington for 25 years, so I'm a semi-insider. I see one of the few things that Congress is actually probably going to be able to agree on in the next 2 years, given the huge division between Republicans and Democrats, is that I think there's a significant chance that we're going to get a payroll tax cut, all right, of some kind of holiday. That may be, I mean, apart from the extension of the current tax, provisions, the Bush tax cuts. Putting that aside, the only new thing I think will be some form of payroll tax cut. And if that is the engine that's going to be moving down the track, I would love to see in that bill some provision on capital gains relief, and that would reward long-term investment. And I would actually be a little narrower than what you talked about. I'm not sure I would give capital investment. I'm not sure it's productive from the economist's point of view to give capital gains relief to, let's say, investment in natural resources and a lot of other deals. I want the relief to be focused on investments in startups, all right? And so, you know, the Obama administration had a variation of this. You know, I think on the small business bill that passed, but I think it expires in January. And I would like to see some kind of permanent capital gains zero rate for investment after, let's say, longer than 5 years in startup businesses. And I think that, more than anything, would solve the capital gap, because, you know, all this Sturm und Drang about small businesses can't get any money and whether there's no demand or whether the banks are being stingy or whatever. I think at the end of the day, people like you generally get started, that bootstrap their credit cards, all right? That's how they initially get started. But at the end of the day, what they really need initially is some kind of seed equity capital. You're not going to get a bank loan for like $100,000 when you got no collateral. You need some equity investment. And what better way to get equity investment at that initial stage than have investors out there that don't have to pay any tax on it, all right? And that to me solves the capital gap. And people talk about the valley of death and all the various terms and so forth. That's how you bridge the valley of death, is that you give the tax incentive to invest. We've
seen a lot of the things that you guys have been talking about come up in front of Congress for years now. And you know, particularly with the trade agreements, the H-1B visas, and we might have gridlock for the next 2 years. Do you think that the business environment for entrepreneurs, are you optimistic about it in the next 2 years? Is gridlock a good thing? There's an adage, obviously, that sometimes it's good for business to have gridlock because you know that things aren't going to change for a while. So
before you guys get into facts and details, I would just say when you're asking entrepreneurs if they're optimistic, they're going to say yes. Every entrepreneur is optimistic they can make it work. So I think you need to moderate the question there when you're talking to entrepreneurs, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
I'll take it, Brian.
Sure.
You know, entrepreneurs are basically libertarian. You can't put a political label on them. You know, entrepreneurs just want everything out of their way and just leave me alone and I will go conquer the world. Just don't put barricades up in front of me. You know, so I think entrepreneurs, you know, as you say, Mike, are always optimistic. So as I look at it, you know, I think, you know, there are often times that the right answer for government is to do nothing. And I don't think we should have this sense of urgency of, oh, we need to do something. You know, if you get out of the way and you get rid of the specter of all of these costly regulations that are out there. I think the big thing that's hurt this economy the most for the last couple of years is the specter of, you know, what is going to happen to my healthcare cost over the next 4 years when this comes in? What is going to happen if cap and trade passes? You know, what is going to happen to my income tax rates? What's going to happen to payroll taxes? And all of that's unresolved. So I think in a lot of ways, you know, if we just, you know, sat back, took a deep breath and said, you know, this is not high on the agenda right now. We're going to focus, as you say, on helping entrepreneurs get rid of the barricades to build their businesses. I think good stuff will happen if you just, you know, don't try to do the bad stuff.
Mm-hmm. Gary, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking back the last 2 years, it's probably been the worst. There's a silver line to the cloud we talked about earlier, is it's created destruction. It's been a very difficult time economically, and that's forced people to become entrepreneurs. So there's that, it's a silver line. But the dark cloud was the economy has really been difficult and challenging. There's a lack of consumer confidence. And the government has meant well, but frankly, most things they've done have made it worse. Just take this $600 reporting thing that every not only every business in the country now has to fill out a whole bunch of forms on. So, I mean, the Obama administration even did a study, the SBA, and they found that the businesses with fewer than 20 employees incur regulatory costs 42% greater than larger firms. So there's all these layers of well-meaning regulation and legislation just keep coming on, and it appears that logarithmically rate the last 2 years, and you add that to the uncertainty of what's going on with taxes, and it is challenging. Plus, you add that to the fact that there are structural issues in the U.S. economy which are not being addressed, mostly involving our deficit, and the fact that the rest of the world is growing quicker and the U.S. is the only city. We are in deep, deep trouble as a nation, and frankly, the partisanship is, I think, what the public's saying. Oh my gosh, just, you know, we're sinking, and you guys are fighting over the colors of the life jackets. So that's why we come back to innovation is our best hope, and federal government, you just gotta, you know, give some predictability, at least in the business environment. What are the taxes? I think most businesses would say, I'm really willing to pay higher taxes if I know what they are for the next several years, and if you cut some government spending, give me some regulatory uncertainty, get rid of the underbrush I have to go through to create a business. The economy's in trouble, and it's going to be like that for a while, and that is why we need entrepreneurs, and our, you know, there's not a lot of them in Congress, and once they become here, they're no longer entrepreneurs. So I think anything we could do as a country to focus on job creation from entrepreneurs, not from government. We got to get away from this thing that government creates jobs. The only government jobs created are those in the federal government and the state government. They don't create jobs. They just cause problems for jobs creators.
Since a lot of these jobs that have gone might not come back, what do you see as the most fertile sectors for entrepreneurship? Anyone?
Well, capitalism is ugly. So, I mean, it is what we have as an economy, but if you think about it, we've gone through 3 major shifts, since our country was formed. We started as an agrarian economy. We moved to a manufacturing economy. You know what? The farmers didn't get the factory jobs, but their kids did because they were well educated. We moved from a manufacturing economy to an information economy. The people in the factories didn't generally get the knowledge jobs, but their kids did. So there are always discontinuities in a capitalist economy. I think right now we're moving from somewhat of a information economy to what I'm going to call a creative economy, where what we can harness in America that we have uniquely. And I was in Europe last week talking to some of our investors over in Finland, Denmark, and Germany, and it was astounding. What they said was, we can't think of more than a handful of venture funds in Europe that we'd like to back because that spark of creativity, that ability to take risks, the fact that in America we don't punish someone who fails, we actually help lift them up and start another business. That spark doesn't exist in a lot of other parts of the world, and it exists here. So to your question about, where do I see opportunity? We see boundless opportunity. We see huge changes happening in the media industry. It's $100 billion of advertising spend that is now trailing where people's eyeballs are going. We're no longer spending as much time listening to the radio, watching television, reading newspapers, reading magazines. We're using our iPad, we're using our iPhones, we're using different devices. That advertising money is going to move. E-commerce. We expect today to buy things online. More complicated things are moving online. Wine is a $40 million business, yet every state has regulations that makes it difficult to buy wine online. 2% of that business is online. High-end fashion, we've seen flash sales, we've seen Groupon, those types of phenomenon happening. That is going to go much more upscale. It's going to go to more custom clothing. You're going to see a lot of interesting things there. Healthcare, huge opportunity because you can't take